Welcome to Community UU Church Online. I'm Sarah Riling, one of the worship associates. We are glad that you are here with us today. Whether you are a member, a new, or a longtime visitor, or you just found this video on YouTube, may you find connection with us and food for your mind and spirit. Our guest speaker today is Dr. David Utzler. David Utzler received his PhD in philosophy from the University of North Texas in Denton. He is a founding scholar of the subfield of environmental philosophy referred to as environmental hermeneutics, and was a co-editor of the first book devoted to it, Interpreting Nature, the Emerging Field of Environmental Hermeneutics. David is currently a part-time instructor in philosophy for the North Central Texas College. He lives in Allen, Texas with his wife, Allison, where he spends a lot of time reading, playing guitar in a mediocre fashion, listening to music, and petting their 2 dogs and 4 cats. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Come, let us worship together. Flame of fire, spark of the universe that warmed our ancestral hearth, agent of life and death, symbol of truth and freedom, we strive to understand ourselves and our earthly home. This church, like all Unitarian Universalist churches, is not bound by a creed. We are not required to make an affirmation of faith or belief. Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal religion, and each church develops its own covenant. Our covenant is about the ways we promise to be in relationship with each other and the wider community. We recommit ourselves to these promises each time we recite this church's covenant. Please join me as once again we say these words together. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another.
Gather in sympathy now and then. winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding in all. Gathered in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again.
This we know. The earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. This we know. All things are connected like the blood that connects one family. All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons and daughters of the earth. We did not weave the web of life. We are merely a strand of it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. A benefit of the spiritual community is sharing our happiness and our burdens. Please use the chat feature to share what is on your heart today with us. Spirit of love and life, be with us in our joys, milestones, and sorrows. Help us to be compassionate to ourselves and to each other. May we be the peaceful, calm presence that is needed in the world as we work for justice for all. Today's speaker, Dr. Utzler, tells us that individual identity is never wholly individual. As the late French philosopher Paul Ricoeur wrote in his book, Oneself as Another, The selfhood of oneself implies otherness to such an intimate degree that one cannot be thought of without the other, that instead one passes into the other. Today's message considers a component of identity called environmental identity. That is, how our selfhood is constituted in relation to environments, and why that is important as we face environmental crises today. Please welcome David Utzler and his message for today, Growing Your Environmental Identity.
I want to express my gratitude to Pastor Chris, to Sarah, and the whole team at Community Unitarian Universalist Church of Plano for the opportunity to share with you all today. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. This seventh principle of the Unitarian Universalist Church holds within it many insights. One such insight, to my mind, is that who each of us are, to some extent, is constituted by who and what we are not. If we are indeed a part of a larger web of existence, and that web is interdependent, then none of us can be fully who we are outside of this dynamic of relationships. None of us can think of ourselves without the other. This would also suggest that your being, my being, each and every one of us, in the very fact of our being, has something to contribute. Interdependence means that dependence is mutual and reciprocal. The web of existence is depending on you and your part as much as you depend upon it. In short, you matter. We all matter. I'm placing these thoughts on the interdependent web of all existence in the context of identity, and very specifically, what I'm calling environmental identity. I chose the title, Growing Your Environmental Identity, for two reasons, and quite intentionally. One, when you think of the earth and living things, everything is constantly in a state of change. One of the most exciting things about having a garden is to watch a fruit or vegetable emerge, and then to watch it grow. Two, identity is much the same way. As we will see throughout this reflection, identity, one's self-concept, is likewise always in a state of change. Your environmental identity specifically is something that you must grow. It is something that has to be nurtured. To understand more what I mean by environmental identity, I want to talk about identity and selfhood generally. To guide our reflection, I want to turn to the late philosopher Paul Ricoeur, who in his book Oneself as Another outlined three different aspects of how to understand the self. Each are connected, but it is the third that is of particular importance. The first is that no one knows themselves directly, but through the detours of life through which we come back to a sense of ourself. Things like our culture, the place and time in which we were born, the values of our family, our communities, our interests, our path of faith, and so many more things mediate the sense of self. Anytime one says, I, as in I think, I act, I feel, that I does not emerge out of a vacuum. Think of it this way. Anytime you meet someone and they say, tell me about yourself, you tell them your story. You tell them things about yourself from which you have derived your sense of self. There is no I that exists nowhere. We could say that each I is understood from within that interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. The answer to the question, who am I, is always a reflection of these relationships. The second aspect of selfhood is what Paul Ricoeur referred to as the dialogue between sameness identity and self-identity. Sameness refers to that aspect of yourself by which you can be identified as the same person over time, despite change. A child who takes her first breath at the beginning of life is the identical person who takes her final breath when life has come to a close. That person has undergone many changes, but it is still that person you recognize who has done so. If you say someone of someone, he is not the same person he used to be. That person still has the sameness by which he is identified, even though he has changed. The person who you are is a constant dialogue between sameness and change. This means that growing never stops, and the chances to become a better person are always available. The third, and most important for our reflection, is what Ricoeur called the dialogue of oneself with another, the self and the other than self. He does not merely mean any comparison of ourselves to the other. He says it is a kind of otherness that constitutes selfhood as such. Very beautifully expressed, Ricoeur said that, quote, the selfhood of oneself implies otherness to such an intimate degree that one cannot be thought of without the other, that instead one passes into the other. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Environmental identity can be defined as when, in my very concept of myself, I cannot think of myself without the other, of the environment. Who I am is in part a consequence of my relationship to the environment. Let me interject here. There are many kinds of environments. The room in which I am now sitting is an environment. We talk of social and cultural environments. But today my focus is on what we typically refer to as the natural environment. I want to avoid any romantic notions of the natural environment as if there is a pure nature that exists apart from human presence, or as if nature is anything that is not human. For we too, as a part of that web of existence, are fundamentally as much a part of nature as non-human nature, even when we don't always act like it. That said, environmental identity in each of us comes out of our disposition towards other than human nature and our relationship to it. So an environmental identity can be as destructive as it can be beneficial. If the earth is for me nothing more than resources to be exploited, then my selfhood constituted in relation to the environment is one of domination and control rather than harmony and cooperation. If we are to speak of growing our environmental identity, then we must reflect upon our relationship to it in light of the seventh principle. Practically speaking, growing your environmental identity in terms of respect must be done purposefully. While we cannot solve all the serious environmental problems facing our planet today just by our individual choices, it is important that we do what we can not to be a part of those problems. What do I eat and where does it come from? Do I really need to buy plastic water bottles every week? Even if I am conscientious to recycle the bottles, am I aware of where the water comes from and who is affected by its extraction? I think here of Greta Thunberg and her school strikes for climate change. She is one person who takes her environmental identity very seriously, knowing that the very future of her existence is dependent upon what we do about climate change. Her case is revelatory. Here is one person with a very reflective and mature environmental identity, but her future is an independent one. The best thing she has done by her radical acts is raise awareness with the hope that more of us will grow our environmental identities and leaders in the world will act accordingly. If Thunberg teaches us anything, it is that the respect for the interdependent web of all existence must be a collective effort if we are to succeed. We are truly connected to one another, and there is hardly anything each of us does that does not both directly and indirectly affect the whole. This brings me to the final part of this reflection, which is about environmental justice. Environmental justice can be defined as the issues and concerns of social justice in environmental contexts. Environmental justice specifically addresses environmental issues where people live, work, and play. In this context, environmental identity is also related to social justice. Keep in mind, your environment is not merely the physical material space that you inhabit, but the meanings that those spaces have for your life and for a community. It is in our relationship to a place that we form our identity. Our identity is related to meanings that our environment holds for us. When those environments are altered in environmentally destructive ways, such that identities are disrupted, it becomes an issue of justice. As such, environmental identity can and should be an important and powerful factor in decisions of public policy and law. If we ask ourselves what it means to show respect for the interdependent web of all existence, or how we do that, environmental identity can be a practical guide. Taking into account how identity is formed by a people's relationship to their environment can become a powerful factor for justice. Growing your environmental identity means that it must be nurtured. First, we must be aware of and acknowledge that we have an environmental identity. Your identity and selfhood are constituted, among other things, by how you understand the environment and how you relate to it. Second, educate yourself as much as you can about environmental issues such as climate change, food justice, water issues, environmental racism, to name just a few. Third, ask yourself, what can I change in my life so that my impact is as minimal as possible? For instance, ask yourself, how many single-use or throwaway things do I use on a regular basis that I can change to more reusable or sustainable items? May each of us think of the other of the environment, to return to the words of Paul Ricoeur, to such an intimate degree that we cannot think of ourselves without the other of the environment, that who we are in our identity is formed by passing through it. For we surely do pass through it as, to close with the reference again to the seventh principle, an interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part.
I have to admit, I'm in the rough. Try to forget, but it's just so tough, yeah. Hungry for peace, and whenever I ease it, the more it just breaks me down. No, but I still hang on. So if there's no pressure, there'll be no diamonds. So I don't mind it coming my way, no. I'm tired of putting out the fire. Freedom is all I desire. If there's no pressure, there'll be no diamonds. And I know I will be a diamond, diamond, diamond. I know I will be a diamond, diamond, diamond. People say they hear you, but they don't really understand. It's really so exhausting. They're trying to reach out for someone's hand. Keep on telling me it gets better. It's hard to see when all I get is bad weather. No, but still I know, yeah. If there's no pressure, there'll be no diamonds. So I don't mind it coming my way, no. I'm tired of putting out the fire. Freedom is all I desire. If there's no pressure, there'll be no diamonds. And I know I will be a diamond, diamond, diamond. I know I will be a diamond, diamond, diamond. Home for me, press on me, I don't mind seeing it coming my way. Home for me, press on me, I don't mind seeing it coming my way. Home for me, press on me, I don't mind seeing it coming my way. No. Home for me, press on me, I don't mind seeing it coming my way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There'll be no. So I don't mind it coming my way. I don't mind, yeah. Freedom is all I desire.
Our wish at Community UU Church is to cultivate a spirit of gratitude and generosity in all things. As we are grateful for the many gifts we have been given, the natural outwelling of this gratitude is generosity. May you know the grace of gratitude and the generosity of spirit that giving brings. If you wish to support Community UU Church and its ministries by your giving, you can mail a check to our church building. The address is on our church webpage, communityuuchurch.org. Or you can go to the webpage and click on the blue Donate Now button to donate by credit or debit card. Thank you for your generous gifts. Our time together today is ending, and as is our custom, we will extinguish our chalice. Please say the words together with me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining stars to you. Deep peace of the infinite peace to you. Amen, and blessed be.